Hi and welcome to Military Diorama. Today's video is part 4 in the painting and weathering of my Academy Early Tiger, which is 13509 I believe. I'm going to be doing some enhancements to the winter camouflage, which I did a previous video on, which is linked in the description and in the top right. I attempted to do a winter whitewash with watercolours because I just wanted to really. I've seen people using washable paints or using the hairspray technique, which I've used before for whitewash camouflage. I just thought I'd try using the watercolours, and I was very happy with the effects that I achieved. But it still needs a little bit of work, so I'm going to enhance it with oil colours. I'm just going to start by showing you how I set up my palette. I saw this on Ronaldo Studios live feed, where he uses double-sided sticky tape to mount the shot glasses to the table so they don't fall over. So I've mounted 2 shot glasses to some cardboard, which I'm using as a palette. I'll fill these with odourless thinners, and then I put the oil paints I'm going to be using, which in this case are Ivory Black, Titanium White and Payne's Grey. The Payne's Grey is a new tube, so it will have quite a lot of linseed oil in it, which needs to leach out before I can use it, along with the other paints, but more so the Payne's Grey, which has got a really nice blue hue to it. As I mentioned before, I'm really happy with the way the camouflage turned out, but as I'm using a dark mud, which is kind of a grey black colour, I want to make the whitewash more white and more blended, so it looks like a fresher whitewash, and also so the mud effects will stand out. I mixed up a couple of grey colours using the Payne's Grey, adding a bit of white to it and also a bit of black, and then also making some other greys just using the black and white, and then blend these in to the white as well as adding white paint to it, just to create a faded whiter camouflage look, so it looks like it's been washed off a little bit. I start off by adding the white to the tank and then blending that down with the with a clean flat brush, and then just adding the greys to build up the faded effect. Once I was happy with the side of the tank, I moved on to the front glacis and just the front side of the tank, basically increasing again the white layer of paint, but also increasing the blended nature of it using the same colour palette. I also used some Indian red mixed with black and some of the Payne's Grey to do some chipping, which I've never done with oil paints before, which works out quite well. And also on the extremities where you'll get mud build up, I increase the white quite a lot because of the contrast with the mud, as I mentioned before, but just going over it slowly as I did on the side, building up the colours. I also did some work on the upper hull and did some whitewash on the tools to obscure some of the wood on the handles and stuff, but also added some rust effects to the tools using the oil paints, using the Indian red again. Once I'd finished the hull of the vehicle, I moved on to the running gear, just painting on the white and greys onto the outer two sets of road wheels, just building it up slowly and then blending it in with a clean damp brush, also adding some streaking and some grease with the blacks and a bit of oil, not oil, rusting, using the Indian red just to give the wheels a bit of a variation. Once I'd finished the whitewash, I decided to try some mud effects using Vallejo Russian Earth, which is, I believe, 28808. I wasn't happy with the effects, so I removed them using airbrush thinners. Also, once I'd done this, I wasn't happy with the fenders, which I'd scratch built out of some plastic, and I replaced those with some metal ones, which I also scratch built, and I was a lot happier with the effect. Unfortunately, some of the paint was removed, so I had to redo those, and also redo the fenders using the grey again, obviously, and also I did the snow effects using some white that I airbrushed onto it, then went back over with oil paints to blend it in to match the rest of the vehicle. Once I'd done that, I restarted doing the earth effects using the Vallejo Russian Earth. I just changed the way I did this a little bit and went a bit slower, applying less paint, less of the earth effects, and just let it down a bit with some water. It's an acrylic product, so you can either use the airbrush thinners or just use water, which I chose to do, and just blended it into the areas where you would see the mud. I didn't do the entire bottom of the tank because you won't see it, but just stippling it on and then blending it in using water. I was quite happy with the effect that I achieved this time. It was a lot better than the first time I did it. I decided to take a break from the mud effects, and I recently purchased some life colour rust and dust, and decided to try this on the exhausts, which I've already tried out on the right hand side, and I thought I'd film it and show you once I got a good effect. I started off, the base of the exhaust is a grey colour from the Panzer Grey that I painted on. I started off with the darkest rust colour and brushed this on. It's an airbrush paint, so it's quite thin, but once I'd brushed this on, I moved to the lighter colour and stippled this in, building up that layer and blending it in, and then moved on to the next lightest colour and continued doing that until I was happy with the effect that I got. I haven't finished the effects yet. I was going to put some pigments on, but when I was airbrushing the fenders, I also put a little bit of white onto the higher parts of the exhaust, not too dense, quite a thin layer, so that it looks like a bit of paint that's been left on rather than just a completely rusted out exhaust. Once I'd finished doing the rusting, I moved on to the rear of the tank with the mud effects and did it in the same manner that I did the rest of it, just stippling it on and let down a little bit with water, and then blended it in with some water, just building it up where you'd find a build-up of mud but not putting too much on. I used a mixture of brushes. I used quite a fat thin brush, sorry, not a fat thin brush, I used quite a fat flat brush, and I also used a smaller brush to do a bit of streaking. So as not to miss any parts with the mud effects, I turned the tank upside down and started to reapply it onto the lower parts of the hull, so that I covered all the bits that would be covered with mud, apart from the parts you won't see. Once I'd finished the mud effects, I then moved back to the snow effects using some oils to reblend it back in, where I'd had to repaint it because of the mishap with the mud the first time, and just blended in the greys and the whites again to build up the contrast and the streaking effect and the fadedness or faded effect on the rear of the hull. I also added some Vallejo dark mud splashes to the Vallejo dark earth, which darkened the paint a little bit for a bit of contrast. I also added that to the lower hull on the mud area just for a bit more contrast. I also did that on the front of the tank, which I'll go back to in a minute, where I go back over the effect where it's lower, or in little nooks and crannies where the moisture would stay around longer. I darkened it for a wet effect and also to increase the contrast of the paint. This is where I'm adding the dark mud splash effect to the earth pigment, not the earth pigment, the earth effect, just to darken it a little bit. It's 73808, I believe. But that's all I've got time for. I'm still waiting for some pigments from VMS, which should arrive next week, and I can finish off the weathering then. In the meantime, I will be doing my best to finish the barn off so I can get this series wrapped up before Christmas. I've got a lot of work on at the moment because I'm just quite busy at work, so I'm sorry for the lapse in videos, but I'll do my best to get one up next week. I hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next week hopefully.